Hi, everyone. I'm not really sure how to begin this, but I really need to write about something that has happened in my relationship. My girlfriend, Kimberly, 28 years old, and I have been together for about 3 years. In the beginning, everything was almost perfect. We had fun together, laughed at the same things, and I felt like she truly understood me. But over time, certain patterns in her behavior have become clearer, especially regarding how she acts in social situations and when she drinks alcohol. Now, I'm in a situation where I really need advice or at least a way to process everything that has happened. I met Kimberly about 3 years ago through mutual friends. She was incredibly charismatic, full of energy, and seemed deeply engaged in almost everything she did. I was drawn to her right away, not just because of her appearance, but because she had a presence that filled the room. She could talk about anything and often made people laugh. I'm a more calm and reflective person. I don't tend to take up much space in a group, but I like listening and asking questions. It felt like we complemented each other quite well. When we became a couple, we traveled a bit together, met each other's families and friends, and I got to see her social side up close. Even when she was sober, she could be flirtatious and playful, but I mostly saw it as part of her personality. I didn't feel threatened by it because I trusted her. She was always very clear that she loved me and wanted to be with me. However, I started to notice that the more alcohol she consumed, the more flirtatious and physically close she became with other guys. At first, it was just a few comments, maybe an extra hug or an implication, but I thought it was just harmless joking. Besides, it wasn't very often that we ended up in situations where she was heavily intoxicated. But when we moved in together a little over a year ago, we started attending more parties with friends and acquaintances, and I noticed a worrying trend. She completely lost her inhibitions when she drank too much. I tried a couple of times to bring it up with her in a calm way. She would usually respond with something like, "It's not that bad," or "I'm just joking." I realized she wasn't taking my concerns seriously. Now to the party that actually became the tipping point. Kimberly and I, along with some of our mutual friends, were invited to a larger gathering hosted by an acquaintance. Let's call him George, not the guy involved in this story, just the host of the party. Kimberly was excited. She loves meeting new people and had bought a new outfit. I was a bit anxious because I knew how things could get when she drank a lot. At the same time, I didn't want to ruin the mood by nagging her beforehand, so I hoped for the best. During the first few hours, everything went okay. We mingled, talked to various people, and she seemed to be in a good mood. I thought maybe it would be a calmer evening than I had feared. But as time went on, I noticed Kimberly taking more and more drinks. She laughed louder, gravitated towards different guys to talk, and joked in a way that felt more and more inappropriate, at least in my eyes. I tried giving her a meaningful look at one point, but she just smiled and gave me a quick kiss. It was as if she didn't want to acknowledge my concern. After a while, I noticed that she had ended up in a corner of the room with a guy named Brandon. He's not a close friend of mine, but he shows up at the same parties now and then. I've always thought he's quite confident and flirtatious, and I guess Kimberly was drawn to him because he gave her a lot of attention in return. I saw how she laughed at everything he said and how he put his arm around her shoulders. I tried to stay calm. I mean, you can hug whoever you want, but I became noticeably uncomfortable when I saw her body language signaling something more than just friendly interaction. As the evening stretched into the early hours, I saw Kimberly leaning closer and closer to Brandon. She laughed hysterically, put her hand on his thigh, and seemed generally drunk. I heard her joking with him about how some guys just don't really know how to make a girl relax. It's possible she wasn't referring to me, but the thought that she might be implying something I couldn't control made me sick. Eventually, I saw something that made my heart pound with anger and shame. She physically sat in his lap. I saw her put her arms around his neck, and he didn't seem the least bit reluctant. She whispered something in his ear, and he laughed smugly. I wasn't close enough to hear exactly what she said, but her demeanor made it clear that it was something of a sexual nature. My pulse quickened, and I felt the need to intervene. I walked over and put a hand on her shoulder, trying to say in a low voice that I needed to talk to her in private. She giggled at first, but when she saw the serious expression on my face, she reluctantly got up from Brandon's lap. I pulled her aside, away from the others who were partying, to try to talk. I said straight out, "Kimberly, you have to stop this. I don't understand why you act like this when you drink." I tried to stay calm, but I was shaking with irritation. Her reaction was shocking to me. Instead of apologizing or even trying to reason with me, she started raising her voice and mocking me in front of a few people who happened to be nearby. She shouted something like, "Oh, are you afraid you're not man enough? I'm just trying to have fun. You're so insecure," and continued to imply that I didn't know how to satisfy a woman. I felt people's eyes turn toward us, watching curiously. I have never felt so humiliated in my entire life. I tried to get her to lower her voice, but she practically basked in the attention she was getting as she verbally attacked me. I was completely stunned, at a loss for words, and before I could even gather myself, she had turned on her heel and gone back to Brandon. She was so drunk that she seemed indifferent to whether she was hurting me or not. I stood there for a moment, feeling anger and shame welling up inside me. To see your own partner, someone you love, sitting in another guy's lap and then openly mocking your manhood in front of other guests. It was too much. I grabbed my things, basically just my jacket, and left the party without saying goodbye to anyone. I drove home to our shared apartment. During the drive, I could barely focus. I was so upset. When I got home, I turned off my phone to avoid seeing if she would call or text, as I assumed she might realize what she'd done and apologize. But no, nothing happened. I didn't get a wink of sleep that night. I just lay there thinking about how I ended up in this situation. The guilt, the shame, the anger, all of it churned inside me. I knew I had to bring this up with her as soon as she came home, but part of me wondered if she would even come home. The fact that she didn't follow me or try to call, but instead chose to stay, made me furious. Was there no limit to her disrespect? I must have nodded off because I woke up to the sound of the front door opening. I looked at the clock and realized it was well into the morning. Kimberly, who looked completely out of it, staggered in, barely said a word, and went straight to the bedroom to sleep. I was too tired and maybe too angry to confront her on the spot, so I let it pass. I heard her collapse onto the bed, still heavily intoxicated. It was clear she wouldn't be able to have a coherent conversation in that state. I waited until the afternoon. I sat in the living room, motionless, running different scenarios through my head. Should I pack my things? Should I demand she move out? Should I even be able to look her in the eye again? But at the same time, I had so many questions. I needed to understand why she behaved like this and if there was any chance of salvaging our relationship. When she finally woke up, she came out of the bedroom with a massive hangover. She looked at me on the couch and gave me an apologetic look, but said nothing directly. I took the opportunity to ask her bluntly, "Where were you all night? What did you do with Brandon? Why are you putting me in this situation? How can you call me insecure and unmanly in front of all our friends?" My tone was probably harsh, but I thought it was justified. I wasn't trying to yell, but my voice was tense. She slumped a bit, held her head in her hand, and mumbled that she had a migraine and couldn't discuss it now. I stood firm and said we needed to talk, that we couldn't postpone this. She claimed she didn't remember much because of the alcohol. She started crying, saying she was too drunk and that everything was just a stupid mistake she couldn't control. I replied that even if you're drunk, you still bear responsibility for your behavior. She couldn't even give me straight answers about what she had done with Brandon after I had left. She waved away my questions, trying to apologize, but without giving me what I asked for: honesty. I felt desperate. I told her, I need to know what really happened. I need to know if it was more than just what I saw. Because you obviously seem to want something with him. How can you say you don't remember? She kept crying and just repeated that she was too drunk to know. I almost exploded with frustration and told her that I couldn't tolerate a relationship where my partner openly sits in another guy's lap, mocks me, and then refuses to give me clear answers. I said outright, "If you can't be honest with me now, I don't see how we can continue this." She begged me to calm down, saying she was sorry and wanted to make things right again. But all she offered were excuses, nothing concrete about what had actually happened between her and Brandon. I felt completely powerless. I didn't know if she was withholding the truth because something serious had happened or if she genuinely didn't remember. Both options felt terrible. Throughout the rest of the day, we existed in some sort of limbo. I had threatened to leave her if she didn't tell the truth, but she seemed incapable of doing so. In the evening, I was sitting alone on the couch while she went off to clear her thoughts. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from one of Kimberly's friends, Jessica, who had also been at the party. I opened the message and my heart sank as I read the contents. Jessica wrote that she felt compelled to tell me what she had seen and heard after I left the party. She didn't know if Kimberly had already told me, but she suspected that Kimberly would deny or avoid addressing what had happened. Jessica explained that Kimberly and Brandon had continued hanging out for the rest of the night, that they had gone into an empty room together in the venue, and that, according to Jessica, it seemed like they were doing more than just talking. Jessica also wrote that several other guests had noticed this, and that some even heard her moans from the room suggesting more than innocent flirting. Someone had accidentally opened the door and then quickly closed it again upon realizing what was going on. According to Jessica, people were talking afterward about Kimberly's behavior, and it was obvious that she had been unfaithful to me. When I read this, I felt my blood boil. Everything she had denied or claimed not to remember now seemed like a big lie. If Jessica was telling the truth, it wasn't just public flirting and humiliation, but also something significantly worse in a private room. I felt sick at the thought that she could go that far, especially in the same venue where I had been. I was breathing heavily, trying to hold back tears. Jessica ended her message by saying she was sorry to have to interfere, but that she felt I had the right to know what was going on. I thanked her for being honest, even though it felt like my world was falling apart. I sat in silence for a few minutes, rereading the message several times to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. Then I got up and went into the room where Kimberly was. She was sitting on the bed with her face in her hands. I assumed she was trying to figure out how to handle the situation. I just said, "I know what happened. Jessica told me everything." Kimberly looked up and I saw the fear in her eyes. She initially tried to ask what Jessica had said, but I could tell she understood that I had the truth in my hands. I repeated with a shaky voice, "You went into another room with Brandon. You didn't just talk. Several people have confirmed it." She started shaking her head, saying she didn't remember. I interrupted her and said, "Stop, you've spent hours claiming you don't remember, but I know you do. You're just choosing not to tell me. But whether you remember or not, this is too much. You've completely humiliated me. You've shattered my trust. I'm done." I grabbed my keys, wallet, and a bag. I packed a few clothes and essentials. She clung to my arm, pleading and begging me to stay, crying and saying she was afraid of losing me. But by that point, I had already shut off my emotions. I no longer saw her as my partner. I saw her as someone who had deliberately stepped on me and lied to me. As I walked toward the door, I saw her sink to the floor crying, but I couldn't even feel pity anymore. A few days later, I'm temporarily staying with a friend named Chris. I didn't want to burden my family with this yet, so I sought refuge on Chris's couch. My emotions are in complete chaos, but I am determined not to return to Kimberly. She has bombarded me with texts, calls, voice messages, everything. She says she loves me, that she just had a lapse, that she never meant to hurt me, that she never thought it would go that far with Brandon. She says she needs me and that she's willing to change. But in my eyes, the trust is gone. She also claims that she barely remembers anything that happened in that room. She gives various excuses. She was burned out, had been working a lot, was stressed, mixed strong drinks. All of this may be true to some extent, but none of it justifies what she did. I keep asking myself how she could humiliate me in front of everyone, call me insecure and unmanly, and then go off with another guy, especially when she knows I've been worried about her drinking and flirting. And now, how can she expect me to just forget everything and move on as if nothing happened? Mutual friends have also reached out. Some think I should give her a chance to explain herself, maybe go to couples therapy or something similar. Others say it's best if I leave her, that a person who behaves like this probably won't change overnight. My friend Chris, who I'm staying with, thinks I should stand firm and stay away. He says this isn't the first time she's shown a lack of respect, even though this was the most extreme case. Kimberly has also asked our mutual friend Danielle to call me to persuade me to come home. Danielle explained that Kimberly is distraught, not eating properly, crying all the time. But honestly, I don't know if I can trust anything anymore. Is it genuine remorse she feels, or is she just afraid of being left alone? Why didn't she think about the consequences before doing what she did? After many sleepless nights, I've realized that I can't go back to her. I told her over the phone when she called and cried. She begged for one last chance, but I said I didn't want to. That I couldn't. I ended the call and blocked her number for now. I need peace and quiet to heal. Some might think I should give her a chance to prove she's serious about changing, but for me, it feels impossible to continue. Maybe some of you think we could go to therapy or something similar, but in this situation, where she so blatantly chose to humiliate me and went so far with another guy, everything feels ruined. I can't imagine how we would ever rebuild trust. I also find it hard to see how I could spend time with her and feel love when I have these images in my head. Her in Brandon's lap, mocking my manhood, and then walking off with him to another room. It's too much. Chris has been a great support. He says I can stay as long as I want. I've started looking for another apartment. I don't want to live in the one I shared with Kimberly. Even though it's a practical process and involves moving and such, I just want to leave everything behind. I haven't even picked up all my things yet, but I'll do it in stages when I feel ready. I plan to ask her not to be there when I come to gather my belongings. I don't know if she'll respect that, but I can't handle more dramatic outbursts. I just want to move on, no matter how cliche that sounds. I don't know what those of you reading this think. Maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I should show more understanding that people can make mistakes when they're drunk. But this doesn't feel like a simple misstep. It's a repeated lack of respect that culminated in this betrayal. I don't want to be someone who's constantly forced to forgive the unforgivable. I already feel like my self-esteem has taken a massive hit. I've never felt so humiliated as when she publicly called me insecure and implied that I'm bad in bed. And then for her to move on with another guy the same evening is, for me, the ultimate proof that our relationship isn't worth fighting for anymore.
If you liked this story, please subscribe and give us a thumbs up. It helps a lot, and you won't miss out on any future stories. Take care and live